morning and welcome back to the lecture series on refugee migration diaspora. So, we are continuing with our discussion on the module Diaspora and Cinema. Today, we are going to take up a new film titled The Mistress of Spices. Just like Jhumpa Lahiri is the namesake, The Mistress of Spices is written by an Indian American writer, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. So, The Mistress of Spices is originally a novel by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, which was later adapted into a film by producer and director Paul Maida Burgess. So, the novel The Mistress of Spices was written in 1997. The film stars Aishwarya Rai and Dylan McDermott as its protagonists. The film was released in the year 2006 in the USA. Aishwarya Rai in the film plays the role of the Mistress of Spices, the protagonist whose name is Tilo, and Tilo is an immigrant from India. Dylan plays the role of the male lead named Raven, who is an American. Later, the characters we see Tilo and Raven fall in love with each other, and Raven plays an important role in the shifting identity of Tilo in her newfound land in America. The author of The Mistress of Spices, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, is a first generation Indian immigrant. She is a professor of writing at the University of Houston in the creative writing program. Divakaruni began her writing career as a poet. Her volumes of poetry include Black Candle and Leaving Yuba City. Her first collection of stories is Arranged Marriage, which came out in 1995 and it won the American Book Award. Divakaruni is also the co-founder of an organization called Maitri, which is a helpline founded for South Asian women who are dealing with domestic abuse. So, we see that she is at the same time a writer, a professor and also a social activist. Some of the important works by the author include Arranged Marriage, The Forest of Enchantments, Sister of My Heart and The Palace of Illusions. So, coming to the director Paul Maida Burgess, Burgess is an American screenwriter and director. He's best known for his film Bend It Like Beckham, which came out in 2002. He made his directorial debut with the film adaptation of Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's novel The Mistress of Spices. In exploring films with an Indian cultural backdrop, he collaborates with his wife Gurinder Chadha, who is a British Indian. Some of Burgess's other works include What's Cooking, which came out in 2000, Bride and Prejudice, another film starring Aishwarya Rai, which came out in 2004, and then It's a Wonderful Afterlife, which came out in 2010. The cinematic adaptation of Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's novel The Mistress of Spices, which came out in 2005, is primarily based on exoticizing the spices. The central protagonist, Tilo, is a first generation Indian diaspora. Tilo is an experienced spice seller who is blessed with magical powers, and therefore she is called the Mistress of Spices, who can prescribe spices to treat different ailments. Divakaruni's novel mainly revolves around spices which act as an empowering agent, which have an empowering agency for the Indian community that live in America. But in the film, the audience can see extreme self-orientalism also taking place, a term that has been used very frequently by critic and scholar Lisa Lau. Self-romanticization and self-orientalism is something that we see happening a lot in the filmic adaptation through the use of the spices, the way the spices have been represented. So it deals with the issue of cultural conflict faced in a multicultural diaspora space as depicted in the novel. In any case, the film makes a departure from the novel in various aspects. The filmic adaptation of The Mistress of Spices mostly ignores various important sections, such as the childhood stories and memories of Tilo, and it focuses mainly on the love relationship, the love story between Tilo and Raven, her American boyfriend. Divakaruni in the novel describes Tilo's spice shop as an age old, time worn, and dilapidated space with the purpose of presenting it as a stark contrast to the pompous representation of the new land America. So, at the heart of this new land America stands this Indian spice shop, which is basically very age old, it's dilapidated, it's a little dark and dingy in appearance. And we see that this is in contrast with the American culture, you know, the new and the pompous, showy culture of America, which prides itself on being no older than a heartbeat, to quote Divakarini from her novel. On the other hand, the spice shop in the film is presented almost like a cultural boutique. As opposed to the American culture, the spice shop is like a cultural boutique with glittering interiors, and it almost has a magical tapestry, a magical texture to it. The way the spices are represented in the film looks too attractive. So the film showcases spices from India in a museumized fashion, in a fashion which is too romantic to be true, too unreal. And the presentation almost captivates the viewers precisely for the same reason. It amounts to romanticization of the Indian culture, right? So the way the director shows the spices, showcases the spices, amounts to romanticization of the Indian culture and exoticization of the Indian spices, which are otherwise, we know, mundane cooking ingredients that find space in Indian kitchens and that are a common part of the South Asian culinary scape. According to the New York Times review, so New York Times review calls this film as, I quote, a one-dimensional, sometimes illogical film, but it's certainly good-looking. The Bollywood star Aishwarya Rai, a former Miss World, is exquisitely beautiful, and the photography often looks like an enticing food magazine layout. So that's also a kind of, stereotyping. It is kind of fixing Indian culture and the meaning of India to certain very stagnant coordinates, as if India cannot be anything more or less than this, right? The Mistress of Spices narrates the story of Oriental mysticism and belongs to the genre of post-colonial magical realism. In the original novel, Divakarini describes, I quote, "But the spices of true power are from my birthland, land of ardent poetry, aquamarine feathers," unquote. In the novel, Tilo and other mistresses who are trained by the figure of Old Mother about the magical powers of spices are basically shown as young Indian women who are confined in the body of an old woman, right? And this old woman could actually very well represent none other than India itself, right? India and its time worn, its long tradition, its long legacy with spices, our knowledge of spices, which are not only used for cooking but also for healing, for medicinal purposes. So we see that an old woman has, it's the body of the old woman, and basically young Indian women are confined in this body. Contrastingly, when we come to the filmic adaptation and the filmic experiment of this novel, we see that a young woman is presented. So, this young and beautiful woman, Tilo, is presented with the knowledge of spices and their healing properties, and she lives in a spice shop in Oakland, California. Tilo, being the mistress, has to follow many restrictions in order to be able to use her knowledge optimally in the most effective fashion. She also needs to follow certain restrictions. She can read people's minds and prescribe spices depending on their ailments only if she remains celibate, only if she remains loyal towards her spices, and these spices, like I said, prohibit her from falling in love with a man and stepping outside of the domain of her shop. So she constantly needs to stay within this environment surrounded by spices. She needs to maintain her celibacy. After following restrictions for a long period, Tilo finally gives in to her desires. She submits to her desires when she meets Raven, this American man, and then she readily falls in love with him. She gets emotionally involved with her customers, we see in the film. So she's emotionally engaged, she's emotionally invested towards her customers while trying to solve their domestic issues, their problems in life, and she caters to the needs of the Indian community that is living in the USA. Tilo addresses issues of racism faced by this character, for example, the character of Jaggi, and also she addresses the threat that is faced by Haroun due to his religious identity. And then we see that Tilo is constantly dealing with the complexities that the Indian migrants face. So she is dealing with the complexities that the Indian migrants face during their stay or when they come to America. And this is because of the age-old East-West conflict and clash in cultures. So she is dealing with the populace living in America who are from Indian origin and who are facing different kinds of issues. It could be issue of racism or religious bigotry and very many other complexities. In one scene we see Anupam Kher is playing the character of this helpless grandfather who comes to seek Tilo's help in dealing with his American-born granddaughter named Geeta, which is played by Padma Lakshmi. So Geeta's grandfather had recently come to live with his family in America, and he is very disappointed as he discovers his grandchild's habits. He is disappointed with Geeta's lifestyle, the way she dresses, her late night job, and her mixing with male co-workers. So she seeks Tilo's help in bringing Geeta close to her Indian roots. So when we have, such characters on the focus in the filmic adaptation, we are representing India very summarily as a package. So Indian culture is only about conservatism. People could also say, so Indian culture does not allow opposite genders to work and mingle with each other. That is not exactly the only face of Indian culture, really. There is more to Indian culture than just what is being reflected and presented in this film. So we see that Disney Studios in a way is also doing the same thing. They have very stereotypical, straight-jacketed understanding of Indian characters and Indian culture, which are likely to fall into the pit hole of, into the trap of self-orientalism and self-romanticization. So we see, coming back to this film, we see that the grandfather is seeking Tilo's help to bring Gita back, to her Indian roots, to her Indian traditions. Next, we see this figure of Jaggi, who is facing racism in his school because of his Indian identity. He is prescribed cinnamon by Tilo because cinnamon is traditionally considered as a friend maker spice. So, he makes more friends and he stops facing hostility all the time. Next, the character of Haron, who is a cab driver of Kashmiri origin, is a regular customer of the spice shop. He comes and asks Tilo, whom he addresses as Lady Jaan. So he asks Lady Jaan Tilo to see his fortune in the new land, what lies in the future. Tilo can see his gory and blood-filled past in Kashmir. So with her special power, Tilo is able to see his blood-filled, extremely gory past that he has experienced back in Kashmir, and she prescribes him the chandan spice, the sandalwood, presumably for its soothing effect. According to Tilo's training on spices by the old mother, and the old mother is played by Zohra Sehgal in the film, sandalwood is the spice that cures an individual of the pains of remembrance. Once again, like I already stated towards the beginning of this lecture, the old mother could very well be the symbol of the traditional Indian knowledge of herbs and spices that have curative effect, that have a curative effect, that have medicinal purposes, that are used for wellness, healing, as well as for culinary purpose to enhance taste of food. So here we see that Haron is suggested to use sandalwood, which would calm, which would kind of alleviate his pains from the past, the painful memories from the past. Because sandalwood cures an individual of the pains of remembrance. As Haron rubs the sandalwood on the palms of his hand, he cries and describes his past, only to suddenly forget what he was talking about. So Tilo feels sorry for his past life, and when she sees his fortune, she foretells that the new land will bring him not only fortune and riches, but also love that he desperately needs. So Tilo is also immediately connecting her life with her own, and she reminisces how she herself was displaced from her house. So she herself has undergone this experience of displacement. So Tilo's childhood appears in flashback mode in the film. Born as a girl, she was an unwanted child. She says that a daughter meant nothing more than a dowry debt. Tilo is prohibited from stepping outside of the spice bazaar or the spice shop, and yet once she falls in love with an American boy called Raven, she goes out with Raven for the first time when she foresees some impending danger in Haron's life. She gives Haron black cumin seeds or kala jeera to protect him from the evil eye. She spends the entire day with Raven, driven by her innate desires that she has been suppressing all this while. Upon returning to her spice shop after spending an entire day, a lot of time with Raven, when she returns to her spice shop, she finds that the spices are all lying around on the floor. They are lying all over the floor. Darkness has engulfed her shop. The spices no longer obey her. All spices have left her because she has betrayed them. She has betrayed and broken her celibacy. She has fallen in love, and so she has overstepped the boundaries. She has stepped outside the shop. Tilo is encountered by the apparition, the shadow of the old mother who had taught her the secrets of spices. She warns her to give up on her desires and to return to her spices, to return her loyalty to the spices. Otherwise, she will be punished by the same spices. So, what the old mother tells her as a way of warning is something very, very symbolic. You must return to where you belong. You are in danger. The spices are your traditions. Do not let America seduce you. With dreams of love, you have aroused the rage of spices, unquote. So, her celibacy, something, a kind of, sannyas that we tell in Indian language, her celibacy or sannyas and her loyalty towards spices, her maiden life is something that, gives her some kind of strength to read the future, to tell the future, to cure the ailments through spices. So there is this kind of dedication that she needs to show towards the spices. Her life, in a way, is dedicated towards the spices, and this is a way of showing symbolically her her connection with the traditional Indian roots. Once she severs the ties and very symbolically falls in love with the allurement that America has to offer in the form of this boyfriend Raven, she will be detached from her traditional knowledge. She will lose everything that makes her a proud and a unique Indian, right? Her knowledge of Indian spices will basically depart her. They will desert her, abandon her, and go. So, although Tilo decides to give up on her love and return to her spices, she is again distracted by the arrival of her American lovers. So, the Western forces, basically, the story is symbolically talking about the Western forces that detach an Indian from her roots, from her root knowledge, from her traditions and her legacies. So, once again, the boyfriend, the American lover, who is bearer and who is a representative of everything American, comes back to her life. She decides to consummate their passion for each other in a vivid scene of making love on a bed of red chilies. For the first time, Tilo uses the spices in her own favor in order to make her look more beautiful in the presence of her boyfriend. Later, she is engulfed by Shampati's fire. However, in the filmic adaptation, we see that Tilo is forgiven and she wakes up next morning, next day, and she's forgiven because the spices realize that she has proven her devotion, her dedication towards them. The spices kind of forgive her because she has proven her devotion towards them. The film endorses brand India in Hollywood. We can understand that it is through the figure of Tilo and through a great many self Orientalism tactics and ploys, as well as romanticization of the archaic Indian culture, it almost endorses, it props up the brand India in Hollywood. It successfully flaunts but also museumizes, I would argue, the Indian culture and ethnicity through characters, especially Tilo, but it also celebrates Indian culture through Jaggi and through the values that the grandfather, the figure of the grandfather possesses. So, there is both this celebration as well as museumization of Indian culture. as if sending out a message that Indian culture could not be anything more than what the film represents, which could be something questionable and problematic in nature. So, the film presents multiple facets of the diasporic community living in different cultures. It lacks in representing, however, the psychological and cultural nuances and conflicts. So, the film shows the characters in a straight-jacketed fashion, and the psychological and cultural conflicts and nuances are lacking. This is something that Divakaruni, however, has kept very predominant in her novel. The treatment of psychological nuances and the layered psyche of the characters are on the fore, are something, is something that Divakaruni focuses on. However, despite its own baggage of problems, one could conclude that the filmic adaptation of The Mistress of Spices, at the end of the day, upholds the effortless alliance of the East and the West. So, with this, we come to the end of today's lecture. Let's meet with a new topic in our next lecture. Thank you.